Hello, Joo Young. Would you go ahead and formally introduce and say a few words about yourself?
Hello, my name is Joo Young Lee. I'm an artist based in Seoul, South Korea. I work with sculpture, installation, and 3D animation. I have a deep interest in the themes of fear and survivor, as well as construction of mythologies as a narrative.
Terrific. Thank you, Joo Young. It's so nice to meet you here on Zoom, and I will admit it's my first communication all the way to Korea. And I was very glad to discover your artwork this year. I believe the first reference came from Professor Snow Young-Soo, who has become an integral part of Supernova this year as a curator. She's also just been a very wonderful mentor and advisor. I got to speak with her class in NYU back in March. This was right before the pandemic lockdown. So she was the last artist and associate that I got to see in person, which is really strange to think about currently. But you now have the uncommon distinction of having three works involved in this year's Supernova Festival. They're all related, but will be found in different programs. So I'd like to talk a little bit about each one. The first is titled The World is Thin, Terrain, which finds a human figure surrounded by a dense and swirling layer of disfigured pigeons. So what I'd like to know is, was this the genesis of a body of work for you?
So The World is Thin, Terrain is a series of work, and the terrain film that will be shown in the exhibition is one part of it. It is the beginning of the entire series. I made it in 2017 in the winter. It was how I started to think pigeon as a symbol of resilience, and I started delving more into it and developed more works.
Okay, I see the pigeon sculpture behind your head there on your bookshelf. So I believe that that must be the pigeon. So I understand that your artistic background, like many artists, includes drawing and then a formal shift to sculpture, which you studied for a number of years at Pratt. I also spoke there in March. I was astounded by their sculpture yard, but also fascinated by the separation of their traditional arts campus and that of the new media department where I spoke. Can you tell me a little bit about your transition from sculpture to digital medium and what motivated you to make that shift?
So I studied sculpture in both my undergraduate program at Pratt and my graduate program at School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And in both schools, I was trained academically as a sculptor. And it's still a big part of my identity as an artist. I would say, oh, I'm a sculptor and I make 3D animation. And the transition to 3D animation, it kind of happened naturally when I was in Chicago during graduate program. I happened to take Snow's class actually and find the medium very exciting and engaging. So for me, that transition was something that was very unexpected because I never thought that I would make an animation as my practice. But to recall actually recently, when I was young, like when I was in my teenage, I really liked animations and cartoon. And I just remember I would say, Mom, I want to be an animator. And in the grad school, I started doing it as my practice. And the influence of the sculpture in my work, it's hard to say for me because the way I think is very natural. But when I had studio visit last year at my residency at MANA, I was doing a new media residency. During the several studio visit, there were many people who told me that, oh, you talk like a sculptor or you think like a sculptor. And I think that came up from the conversation and the way I talked about my work. When I work within 3D program, I think a lot about object thickness, space, volume, weight, and gravity. And some of them exist in the program. Some of it doesn't exist because 3D object, unless you add and specify thickness, it doesn't have thickness. It doesn't have weight, right? But I guess like the way how I'm sensitive to space and objects and material and their relations are delivered in the way that I treat 3D object within the program.
Sure. Well, as I was reviewing your work a little deeper, I can see the influence of sculpture in maybe some of your earlier digital works in a particular way. But essentially, a sculptor is working in 3D, and an animator is creating works that you can move around, or you are. I feel like your other two entries. With Supernova this year have a very cinematic construction to them. So I believe it does feel like a very good natural extension, but it's great to have you share those thoughts. There are a number of artists that I revere who, have the background in something more traditional, and how that relates to their work, I can always tell. And I think that's a very wonderful thing. So our first interactions were through your absolutely wonderful proposal for Supernova's Silent Screen Initiative, something that we started exploring last year, but really formalized in 2020 as an opportunity for artists to construct a work specific to the formats of our public LED screen infrastructure. And I want to read the first line from your opening statement. It says, "In a city saturated with glamorous images, desired and human incidents, there are also companion city dwellers who occupy back alleys. A pigeon is one of them." And as I've now seen a moment of this piece on our screen, I feel it's so fitting for our location here in Denver, and what I know about the city dwellers that inhabit, say, the 16th Street Mall here, that's in that location, and the many back alleys that are always troubling to manage in the city. So I'd love for you to convey to our viewers the rest of your proposal and lead into this project.
My work in the silent screen, Mondang, which means dawning, is one iteration of my series, which explores pigeon as a symbol for resilience, a witness to the society, and invisible companion. I was interested in the possibility that these images, these stories of a dying or dead pigeon can go into the public space in the city. So it was very important to me that this large screen is located in downtown of a city. It was the screen that was located above the building. And there's this nice moment when you look up the screen, you see both the architecture of the building and then people in the square and also actual pigeons walking, not flying. And you also see the sky, and then this screen exists in that boundary, in the border. And I think that LED screen could become a space where something magical happen, like a narrative that would happen in the boundary that we usually wouldn't see. So I came up with this story of that pigeon in the back alley of a city, which happens a lot. We see birds being killed naturally or unnaturally on the street, and then we will usually walk away from it, or they end up being in a dumpster. So it'll start from like dumpster area in the back alley, and I wanted to focus on what will happen to it after it's being dead. And so in the story, the time changes, and as night deepens, there will be a flock of pigeons coming, and they have this time of mourning the dying pigeon. And what I wanted to focus was this moment of mourning and grieving, which I think is something that's lacking a lot lately.
Sure, absolutely. Well, it feels both timely as well as timeless. And I know that through your proposal, which I think was one of the most wonderful that I've received, you were so very thorough with it. And it's nice to have that opportunity within this project. We've not had formal proposals before, but the response was great to that. And I know that within yours, you had some historic reference images that the viewers will not see, but for me, it really resonated and connected as something that is timeless. So if you want to explain a little bit about those historic references, that would be terrific.
To make this work, I looked into different art historical references that are related to the themes of death and dance, also nice. So I was looking into dance of death paintings, which is a genre of allegory of that came in late Middle Age. A lot of these paintings or prints were talking about the universality of death. There will be this death or personification of death that dance along to the grave with popes, king, emperor, or child. There is also witches of Sabbath paintings that I was looking into, and then these paintings usually illustrates a gathering of those who considered practice witchcraft at night. And I was actually also looking into early Disney animation, the skeleton dance in 1929. I was interested in how in the art history or in the animation, how people would differently perceive death as a theme. I guess that the difference that I'm focusing on is that in the dance of death, it's focused more on the universality of death. We will all gonna die. It's inevitable. The earthly life is vain. Whereas in my work, what I want to say and what I want to focus is to actually focus on the moment of dying and to have this enough time to mourn and grieve. I think especially at this moment when there are a lot of things happening in the world, we get bombarded of these images of death from the media. Things are going so fast, and then we just don't get enough time to really reflect on it. And I felt very sad on that.
Sure. Yeah, that feels like something that I know everybody is experiencing right now in many, many different ways. Well, it's a very moving piece, and I'd like to have you explain a little bit about your transition from this concept to a working process that constitutes maybe a typical workflow for you, or digital tools that you're going to apply towards this.
So my workflow, it differs depending on the project, but usually I'll come up with one image in my head and I'll make a quick sketch of it. There are usually a few keywords and I start researching on the references. Let's say for Mondong, I had this image of, okay, these pigeons at night dancing. It's dark, and then I want the color to be orange and purple. And I'll start research for references, looking into it, and then see how people have interpreted in different way. And I'll start writing. Its form varies. It can be a script or just a natural writing flow. So I'll make a writing and then I'll create a storyboard from these writings. And then I'll move to 3D program. I use Maya and start building scenes, making character, setting camera and animating and rendering. So this one was what I did for the Mondong piece.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah, and this was the storyboard.
Oh, that's so wonderful. That's the first time I think anybody's shown me illustrations out of their sketchbook. So that's really fabulous.
For my other work, Body Keeps the Score, that's going to be in the screening, this was my original sketch for the storyboard.
Oh, wow.
And later I developed it more into more detailed storyboard. And this is actually very new approach to me. We talked about my shift from more sculptural work into more cinematic work. That shift was a challenge for me, a very big challenge, because I couldn't think in time. It was very hard for me to think, okay, there'll be this image happen, and then like a minute later, there'll be this image happening. I was very used to thinking in space. So to imagine a video that people sit down and watch was a challenge. So that was a big shift for me, but I think that also was natural because I realized that I was very interested in this relationship between image and narrative. And I wanted to make a work that people can watch and get its own story and deliver certain emotions.
Sure. Well, what's most interesting to me, and particularly as a curator of this project and somebody with a background in film and a background in contemporary art, that decision of how long to make a scene. Everything is sort of done in editing, but you're actually composing the sets. You're composing everything, and so that's where the decision lies. And your work that is in the competition, which we're going to talk about it anyway, but I'll just bring it up. Body Keeps the Score. It's a work that has a pretty sustained duration, and to me it is quite mesmerizing, the choices that you made with time in constructing that piece. And that's very different from the one that's for silent screen. And the silent screen piece, I think, because it resides in public, duration can really matter a lot more. So the overall time is I think something that you're dealing with very, very well, and I commend you on it.
Thank you.
So now you finished the silent screen animation late last week. It is exquisite, and I'm so excited to share it with our audience. I actually did put a 30-second sample of this up on that screen this week, and it will play all through the month. And that's something that I'm really pleased that we're able to do. But I would like you to maybe just conclude on that work with explaining the title. I know that there was some issues that you were grappling with that in terms of labeling it for this project.
So the title of the piece that will be shown on the silent screen is Mondang, dawning. And Mondang is a word in Korean which describes this particular moment at night when the dawn is coming but still far away. It has this specific nuance that it's coming but it's still far away, but we know it's there. It is also a word that is used to describe dark moment in the history or society, but when people still believes that, okay, hopeful moment will come. And I thought that this specific word and its nuance and its pronunciation would work really well with the ending of this specific piece, and also current moment. I had a problematic time deciding the title. I think like deciding title is always the hardest thing for me, but I made a decision, and I think dawning also gives a good understanding of what it means to. So I'm happy with it.
Sure. Well, I love that you find the titling to be a challenge, and I will say that I love your titles. Let's flow into the third work that's in Supernova. It's titled Body Keeps the Score. And
Yes.
to me, that's as fascinating and as lyrical a title as I've ever encountered. And I like how you frame the narrative at the start. And I want to just ask you a little bit about this. There are subtitles that state, "On the sidewalks, encased in spotless body bags, the remains of yesterdays." And then there's a pause, and then it says, "Await the garbage truck." And so it's missing a word there, but then it goes into nobody wants to have to think about them further. Nobody wonders where each day the dead bodies go. That's really heavy, but the way you treated that to me seemed very specific. Would you care to comment on that?
Yeah, so Body Keeps the Score is my another work that also has many different references. First of all, the title, The Body Keeps the Score, is the title of the book by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and it is a book on trauma study that I read a lot. Before working with 3D animation, my practice focused largely on trauma study research, archive, translating different testimony into visual languages. And as I was working with 3D animation and making this series, I realized that there's actually the relationship between how I deal with trauma that's either personal or collective as a society, and the way that I work with digital animation. So the title came from that specific book. Script for that beginning part is my rewrite of The City of Leonia from Invisible Cities, written by Italo Calvino. And in that book, there are different cities, and this particular city is the city of garbage. This is the city that refashions itself every day, cleans itself. All the things that people don't want to keep, people want to throw away, they turn into garbage. And the city stays clean, but outside of the city, there is these mountains of garbages, and everything goes into that mountain, and people forget about it because you don't want to think about them. You want to throw it away, right? And what I did with the text was I simply just changed the word garbage with dead body of pigeon. So it was a little shift, but I think worked really well for that images for that particular piece. And I took different part of it and then put it as a reference.
Sure. Well, it's a very haunting work and very elegant. And to me, the this idea of a city of garbage and how I can completely see how you've worked through that. It also feels to me like it's a depiction of a Holocaust in a way. And so there's it's very bold to, I think, go into something of that nature, but it's also extremely powerful. I loved how you created sort of like this sense of a withering heartbeat too. I seem to see that in your works in a particular way, maybe within certain scenes where you're looking at a pigeon, you can't quite tell if it's alive or dead. And then of course, in a previous interview, you stated that you were with this piece, you were working towards the possibility to liquefy bodies through 3D software, and I think you've achieved that very well. But maybe you can talk a little further about that challenge.
So within the piece, there is this moment when this pigeon body turns into liquid jelly form and moves into another world. That liquefying of a body, I think it's something that was possible because I was using 3D software. It was a way of expressing both the decomposition of a dead body, which you will see in real life. You see this dead bird on the street and it slowly decomposes, and then later you will see like nothing left there. But also it was a way to express this emotion visually, this emotion of being like feeling helpless or powerless, this emotion that's like heavy, that's wet, that's very sticky. I think there are a lot of those emotions that are hard to express through words, but through visuals and through these like technology, there was a way to channel into it. And for me, that was this particular moment when this body turns into liquid. So that was my intention. And I think that liquefying moment was from that decision.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I read it as the decomposition leads to the generation of new life, but that new life is still, maybe a bit foreboding at the same time. It's a different type of life or nature that's sprouting up at the end, and I found that to be very fascinating and a great way to complete the narrative. I think I want to conclude with just a few thoughts on where you see the pathway that you are on right now as an artist. I look at this work and I view it as something that I would like to find in a museum setting. And I know that this was presented within a Chicago-based gallery. And let me know a little bit about what the reactions are like and where you want to see your work go.
So for the Body Keeps the Score, I had a solo show at Mono Contemporary Chicago as a part of New Media Residency. I actually had a very exciting reaction from the audience. And I think the best moment was when there were kids coming into the gallery. And they got very excited because I also had these 3D printed pigeons on the floor. So they will hold it and play with it and watch animation. So that moment of having the audience engaging with these narratives is something that I'm really excited about, thinking about showing my work in exhibition gallery settings. Right now, I mean, it's really tough because of the COVID and a lot of things are closed. It's really hard to think how my career will move forward. So I'm taking this time to focus more on 3D animation because it's something that I can do in my home studio using computer, but also I can show it to many other people digitally. Another thing that I'm trying to do is to create more video installation. And I'll have to wait until the galleries and our spaces open to the public again. But what I really want to do is create this space, this immersive space that's full of these animated images, sound, and with these sculptures and translucent film screen that I built specifically for the video installation, and have people walking around, lying down on the floor. And what I want to do with that installation is to create a dialogue. I think creating a dialogue, creating a space for dialogue is what I want to do in the end, from making an artwork and then from doing exhibition and from doing screening, because that's what makes me to really engage with art and other artists' work. I think art spaces, though it has its own systematic problems, it's a space for subversion. It's a space for dialogue and challenges and questions. My challenge and my goal is to bring these narratives of things that are considered invisible, like disregarded, neglected, despised, things that are considered marginal, to be in the center and focus of the narrative, and bring that into life. And this is my story. Let's talk about it. Hey, like this little pigeon on the street, it actually has its own life and story, and you may wanna listen to it for a while. So that's my goal.
Sure. Well, I know that there's so many uncertainties being posed with everybody throughout life right now because of the pandemic. I feel very fortunate that our platform still has possibilities, and I do believe that artists that are working with digital animation and digital tools, do have a pathway to the future. And Joo Young, I want to say that I believe you're so talented that no doubt you're going to realize your goals and your dreams. And that's what I've seen with the work that you have submitted and what you've really put into it this year. So I want to thank you for taking this time to speak with me. And I'm really looking forward to presenting your 3 works here at Supernova this next month. So thank you so very much.
Thank you.